They humiliated him and denied him a table in his own restaurant. But his response made everyone tremble. Anthony Parker tried to hold back tears when the security guard stopped him from entering the main dining room of Bella Italia. His hands shook as he was told there was no table available for him, right in the place he had built with so much love 30 years ago, here in Aspen. The manager, Brian, looked at him with disdain and said the restaurant didn't accommodate people without reservations or those who didn't meet the right appearance. "Sir, you need to understand this is an establishment for people of a certain standard," Brian said, adjusting his tie arrogantly. Anthony couldn't believe what he was hearing. It had only been 3 months since he lost everything, when his former business partner, Richard, took full control of the business. During his hospitalization for a heart condition, Richard had manipulated documents and taken advantage of the delicate situation. "I just wanted to have dinner here one last time," Anthony murmured, noticing the other guests watching the scene with curiosity. "We don't have room for people like you," Brian insisted, motioning for the security guard to step closer. Anthony felt the weight of the other diners' stares. Some older women whispered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable. A younger couple discreetly filmed the scene on their phones. He recognized a few familiar faces, people who had frequented the restaurant when he was still the owner, but no one spoke up in his defense. The security guard, a large man named Mike, placed a hand on Anthony's arm. "Sir, it's better if you leave quietly," Mike said, showing no recognition, even though he had worked at the restaurant for years when Anthony owned it. "All right," Anthony replied, his voice breaking. "I'll go." He turned slowly, each step feeling like a stab to his chest. Bella Italia had been more than just a business to him. It was where he had met Catherine, his late wife, during the grand opening 25 years ago. It was where they celebrated their son's birth, graduations, and milestone birthdays. Every table, every painting on the wall, every recipe on the menu held a special memory. As he passed through the entrance, Anthony remembered the day he had personally planted the rose bushes in the front garden. Catherine had picked each one, saying their fragrance would welcome the guests. Now, even he wasn't welcome in his own dream. On the sidewalk, the cold Rocky Mountain air stung his face. He adjusted his simple coat, nothing like the Italian suits he used to wear in his prosperous days. His shoes were worn, and he noticed he needed a haircut. His appearance certainly wasn't what it used to be when he ran the most prestigious restaurant in town. Anthony was about to walk away when he heard footsteps behind him. "Mr. Parker." He turned and saw a woman in her 70s, her grey hair tied in a simple bun, wearing a modest but clean coat. Her warm brown eyes held kindness and something like recognition. "Do I know you?" Anthony asked, trying to place the familiar face. "I'm Mrs. Jenkins," she said with a sad smile. "I worked in Bella Italia's kitchen for 15 years. Mrs. Catherine always said I made the best tomato sauce in the region." The memory came rushing back. Mrs. Jenkins had been one of the restaurant's most dedicated employees. Catherine had always praised her hard work and the care she put into every dish. She had been let go soon after Richard took over, along with other longtime staff. "Mrs. Jenkins!" Anthony exclaimed, a mix of joy and shame washing over him. "How have you been?" "Just getting by, Mr. Parker. More importantly, how are you holding up?" she replied, gently touching his arm. "I saw what happened in there. What a disgrace." Anthony lowered his eyes, feeling the weight of humiliation once again. "Things have changed so much, Mrs. Jenkins. I'm nobody now." "That's not true," she said firmly. "You're still the man who created the best restaurant in this city. You're still the one who taught recipes no one else can get quite right." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to it. Mrs. Jenkins glanced around to make sure no one was listening and leaned closer to Anthony. "I need to tell you something. Richard came to see me last week," she whispered. "He offered me my old job back in the kitchen, said customers are complaining the food doesn't taste the same as before." Anthony raised his eyebrows, surprised. "And you're going back?" "Never," Mrs. Jenkins replied indignantly. "After being fired so cruelly, tossed aside like an old rag, Not a chance, but it gave me an idea. She looked around again and continued, "You know why the food isn't the same, because Richard doesn't know how to make the special sauce Mrs. Catherine created, the one that made Bella Italia famous across the region. He's tried everything, even hired other chefs, but no one can get it right." Anthony remembered Catherine's special recipe. It was a tomato and herb sauce she'd perfected over years, blending Italian techniques she learned from her grandmother, with local ingredients from the Rockies. The secret wasn't just in the ingredients, but in the method, the exact timing, the little tricks only they knew. "But what good does that do me?" Anthony said bitterly. "I have no power, no money left. I'm just a man who was humiliated in front of everyone." "Listen carefully," Mrs. Jenkins said, taking his hands in hers. "Today's humiliation could be the first step toward tomorrow's victory, but only if you don't give up." "I don't understand," Anthony murmured. "Come have coffee with me across the street," she said, pointing to a small shop on the other side. "There are things you don't know." They crossed the street slowly. The cafe was simple, with a few formica tables and an old counter. The owner, Mr. Wilson, greeted Mrs. Jenkins warmly and offered them a more private corner table. "2 coffees, please, Mr. Wilson," Mrs. Jenkins requested. As they waited, Anthony watched the street. From where they sat, he could see the entrance to Bella Italia clearly. The foot traffic seemed lighter than in the days when he ran the place. "Mrs. Jenkins, what did you want to tell me?" She took a deep breath before speaking. "Mr. Parker, after I was fired, I started working at other restaurants in town. I hear a lot of talk, see a lot of things. Bella Italia is losing customers every month." "Really?" "The reviews aren't good. People say the food lost its special flavor, the service is cold, that the warmth it once had is gone. Many regulars have stopped going." Anthony felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. On one hand, it hurt to see the place he'd built with such love decline. On the other, there was a small satisfaction in knowing Richard couldn't maintain the same standard of excellence. "But that doesn't change my situation," Anthony said. "I've lost everything. I can't compete with him." "Who said anything about competing?" asked Mrs. Jenkins with a mysterious smile. "I'm talking about something much better." Mr. Wilson brought the coffees and a plate of homemade cookies. Mrs. Jenkins thanked him and waited for him to walk away before continuing. "Do you remember the farmers' market downtown?" "Of course I do. On Wednesdays and Saturdays they hold a food fair in the square next to it. Small producers, home cooks, people who make quality food sell their specialties. Lots of activity, tourists, locals." Anthony took a sip of his coffee and waited for her to go on. "I have a cousin who helps organize the fair. He said there's always room for serious people who make real food. The cost is very low, just a symbolic fee." "Are you suggesting I sell food on the street?" asked Anthony, unable to hide his surprise. "I'm suggesting you go back to doing what you've always done best. Quality food made with love," replied Mrs. Jenkins. "But this time without the pressures of a big restaurant, without treacherous partners, without complications." Anthony fell silent for a moment, watching the street activity. The idea seemed absurd. Him, who had run the finest restaurant in the area, selling food at a fair. What would people think? "I know it sounds strange at first," Mrs. Jenkins continued, as if reading his thoughts. "But think about it. You have the knowledge, the recipes, the experience. I can help with the prep. And there's one thing Richard will never have." "What?" "Mrs. Catherine's original sauce recipe. And not just that, but all the little secrets that made the dishes stand out." Anthony stirred his coffee slowly, considering the proposal. It was true. He remembered every detail of the special recipes Catherine had created. Richard had never had access to those, always leaving the creative side of the kitchen to the couple. "But I don't have the money to start any business, no matter how small," Anthony said sadly. "You don't need much," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "A portable stove, some basic pots, ingredients to get started. My son has a pickup truck we can borrow to haul things. I have some savings I can chip in." "I can't take money from you. It's not a loan, it's a partnership," she said with a smile. "I'll be your partner. Together we'll show this town what real food is." Anthony felt a strange warmth in his chest. For months, no one had shown him this much trust, this much willingness to help. Mrs. Jenkins' kindness was sparking a glimmer of hope he thought he'd lost forever. "Why would you do this for me?" Anthony asked, moved. "Because you and Mrs. Catherine always treated me with respect and kindness, because I believe good people deserve a second chance, and because I know together we can create something beautiful again." Across the street, Anthony saw Richard pulling up to Bella Italia in his brand new Lexus. He wore an expensive suit and walked with arrogance, greeting the valet like he owned the town. For a moment, Anthony felt a pang of envy and bitterness. "You see him over there?" Mrs. Jenkins asked, following Anthony's gaze. "Yes." "Then look closely. See how he acts, how he treats people. That kind of pride doesn't last forever. Life has a way of putting everyone in their place." Anthony watched Richard enter the restaurant and disappear through the main door. It was strange seeing someone else running the place that had been his dream for so many years. "Mrs. Jenkins, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you really believe we can succeed selling food at a fair?" She smiled and pointed toward the cafe window. "Do you see all that movement on the street? All these people passing by every day. They're hungry, looking for good food made with care. It doesn't matter if it's in a fancy restaurant or a stall at the market. What matters is the flavor, the love put into the preparation." Anthony nodded slowly. There was a simple, honest logic in Mrs. Jenkins' words that made sense. "When can we start?" he asked, surprising himself with his decisiveness. "Next Wednesday is the market day," she replied, her eyes shining with joy. "We have 5 days to get organized." 5 days isn't much time. "It's enough for those with determination," said Mrs. Jenkins, extending her hand to Anthony. "Do we have a deal?" Anthony looked at her outstretched hand, then at the kind face of the older woman, and finally at Bella Italia across the street. A strange sense of freedom began to swell in his chest. "We have a deal," he said, shaking her hand. At that moment, an idea began forming in Anthony's mind. This wasn't just about selling food at the market. It was about reclaiming his dignity, proving his worth, and maybe, just maybe, showing Richard and the whole city that true quality isn't bought with money, but built with dedication and authenticity. "There's something I need to ask," Anthony said. "Are you sure you remember all the special recipes?" Mrs. Jenkins chuckled softly. "Mr. Parker, I worked alongside Mrs. Catherine for 15 years. I know every ingredient, every seasoning, every special trick. In fact, I even helped create some of the recipes." "Really? The special tomato sauce, for example? It was my idea to add a little honey at the end. Mrs. Catherine loved the suggestion and added it to the final recipe." Anthony was surprised. Catherine had never mentioned that Mrs. Jenkins had helped create the signature dishes. It was yet another sign of how foolish Richard had been to let go of such valuable employees. "How many others were fired when Richard took over?" Anthony asked. "Many. He let go of almost all the long-time staff and hired cheaper, inexperienced workers. George from the pantry, Mary from the dining room, William, who took care of the garden, all of them were sent away. That explains why the service changed so much." "Exactly. The people he hired don't care about the place the same way, don't know the restaurant's history, don't understand how to treat special customers." Anthony finished his coffee and watched the street activity. People walked by carrying shopping bags, others left work, some hurried along. All of them were potential customers for his new venture. "Mrs. Jenkins, there's something else I've been thinking," Anthony said. "Go on." "If we succeed at the market, maybe we can hire back some of the old staff who were let go, people who really know how to work." "That's an excellent idea," she exclaimed. "George is still unemployed. Mary found work at a smaller restaurant, but she earns much less. I'm sure they'd be happy to join us." "Let's take it slow. First, we need to see if our idea will work." "It will work," Mrs. Jenkins said with conviction. "I'm sure of it." The two talked for another hour, planning the details of their new venture, deciding which dishes to prepare, where to buy the cheapest ingredients, how to set up their space at the market. Anthony felt more excited than he had in months. As they prepared to leave, Anthony spotted a familiar figure approaching the cafe. It was Thomas, his son, walking briskly down the sidewalk. The 32-year-old was well dressed in a business suit, carrying an executive briefcase. "That's my son," Anthony told Mrs. Jenkins. "We haven't spoken in almost 2 years." "Why?" "We had a bad fight over business. He thought I trusted Richard too much, said I was being naive. I didn't want to listen, now I know he was right." Thomas stopped in front of the cafe and looked through the window. When he saw his father, his expression shifted from surprise to something that looked like concern. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. "Dad?" Thomas said, approaching the table. "Hi, son," Anthony replied, unsure how to react. "Can I sit?" Anthony gestured to the empty chair. Thomas greeted Mrs. Jenkins politely and sat down, clearly uncomfortable. "Dad, I heard what happened at the restaurant today. A friend of mine was there and told me." Anthony felt his face flush with shame. The humiliation was spreading through the city. "And why are you here? To tell me you were right about Richard?" "No, Dad. I came because I'm worried about you," Thomas said, sincerity in his voice. "I know we haven't talked in a long time, but you're still my father." Mrs. Jenkins noticed the tension between them and discreetly stood up. "I'll let you two talk in private. Anthony, call me tonight so we can go over the details," she said, handing him a slip of paper with her number. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Jenkins." She left the cafe, leaving father and son alone. For a few moments, neither spoke. Anthony fiddled with the empty sugar bowl while Thomas stared at his hands. "Dad, how are you managing?" Thomas finally asked. "I'm getting by," Anthony replied, avoiding details about his financial struggles. "I heard you had to leave the apartment." "That's true. I'm staying at a boarding house near downtown." Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, as if wrestling with emotion. "Dad, I'd like to help. I can pay for a better apartment. I don't need your pity," Anthony cut in, sharper than he intended. "It's not pity, Dad. It's concern. It's love." The word love hung between them like something long forgotten. Anthony looked at his son and saw traces of Catherine in his eyes. Thomas had inherited his mother's brown eyes and her earnest expression when moved. "Why did you really come, Thomas?" "Because I realized our fight was foolish. Because life's too short to stay apart. Because when I heard you were humiliated today, I wanted to go to the restaurant and punch Richard in the face." Despite everything, Anthony smiled faintly at his son's remark. "Violence doesn't solve anything, son." "I know, but it hurt to hear what they did to you. Bella Italia was your life." "It was," Anthony admitted. "But maybe it's time to build a new one." "What do you mean?" Anthony told him about his conversation with Mrs. Jenkins and the idea of selling food at the farmer's market. Thomas listened quietly, without interrupting. "Do you really want to do this?" Thomas asked when his father finished. "I don't know if I want to, but I think I need to. It's a chance to start over. Can I help?" "How?" "I have a business degree. I work at a consulting firm. I can help with finances, planning, organization." Anthony was surprised by the offer. He hadn't expected his son to support an idea that might seem like a step backward. "You don't think it's humiliating? A man my age selling food at a market?" "Dad, what happened today at the restaurant was humiliating. Working honestly, doing something you love, that's never humiliating." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to the story. His son's words touched Anthony's heart deeply. He had raised Thomas to be a man of character, and now he saw that he had succeeded. "Are you sure you want to dive into this crazy adventure?" asked Anthony. "I'm sure. In fact, I've always wanted to work with you. When we were partners with Richard, I never really had the chance to be involved." "Why didn't you ever tell me that?" "Because you were too focused on keeping the peace with Richard. Any suggestion I made, any criticism, you took as disloyalty." Anthony reflected on those words. It was true that he had always been overly protective of his partnership with Richard, even when signs that something was wrong began to appear. "You were trying to warn me about Richard, weren't you?" "I was, Dad. I saw how he looked at the restaurant, how he talked about expanding the business, how he made comments about you getting too old to handle everything alone. And I didn't want to listen." "You trusted him. I can't blame you for that. But now we have the chance to do something together, our way." Anthony felt an emotion swelling in his chest. It had been years since he'd felt so close to his son. Adversity was bringing them together in a way prosperity never had. "All right, son. Let's try it together." Thomas smiled and reached out to shake his father's hand. "Let's show this city what the Parker family can do." They spent the rest of the afternoon planning their next steps. Thomas made a list of everything they'd need to buy, calculated the initial costs, and even suggested a name for the stall: Catherine's Flavors, a tribute to the mother and wife who had always been the creative heart of the restaurant. When they left the cafe, it was already getting dark. The lights of Bella Italia flickered across the street, but Anthony no longer felt the pain he once had. Now there was hope, a plan, and family by his side. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you feel angry at Richard?" Anthony thought for a moment before answering. "I feel sadness. Anger is a feeling that eats you up inside. I'd rather use my energy to build something new." "That's a wise way to look at things." "I learned that from your mother. Catherine always said holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick." They walked in silence for a few blocks. Anthony felt lighter than he had in months. Having his son back in his life, a new project ahead, the prospect of working with food again, all of it brought a sense of renewal. "Dad, there's something else I want to say." "Go ahead." "I want to apologize for pulling away, for not insisting more when you were being deceived by Richard, for letting pride speak louder than love." Anthony stopped walking and looked at his son. "Thomas, I'm the one who should apologize. You tried to warn me and I didn't listen. You offered help and I rejected it. I was proud and stubborn. So we're even. We're more than even. We're united again." The two embraced there on the sidewalk under the glow of an old street lamp. A few passers-by smiled at the sight of the affectionate father and son. Anthony felt like this was the first day of a new chapter in his life. The following Wednesday, Anthony woke before dawn. He'd slept little, anxious about their first day at the food fair. Over the past 5 days, he and Thomas had prepared intensely for their debut. They'd bought a portable stove, basic but good quality pots and fresh ingredients from the farmer's market. Mrs. Jenkins had tested the recipes in her kitchen, adjusting seasonings and portions. Thomas had registered the stall with the fair organizers and designed a simple but attractive look for their space. The name Catherine's Flavors was painted on a wooden sign made by Mrs. Jenkins's son, who worked as a carpenter. They had decided to start with 3 dishes: the famous tomato sauce with homemade pasta, a simplified version of the osso buco that was a hit at Bella Italia, and a fungi risotto Catherine had created using mushrooms from the region. "Dad, are you nervous?" asked Thomas as they loaded things into the borrowed pickup truck. "A little," admitted Anthony. "It's been decades since I cooked for strangers without knowing if they'll like it." "It'll be fine. The food is delicious, the price is fair, and people will notice the quality." Mrs. Jenkins arrived at 5 in the morning, wearing a clean apron and carrying a box of special spices she kept at home. "Good morning, partners," she said cheerfully. "Ready to conquer Aspen?" The food fair was held at Central Square, right in the heart of town. When they arrived, other vendors were already setting up their stalls. There was an older man selling pastries, a Japanese family with yakisoba, a woman with homemade cakes and sweets, and several other small entrepreneurs. Their space was modest but well located, near the square's main entrance. Thomas had planned everything down to the smallest detail: where to place the portable stove, how to arrange the dishes, where to set up the table for serving customers. "Anthony?" said a familiar voice behind him. He turned and saw George, the former pantry worker from Bella Italia. The 50-year-old man looked surprised but happy to see his old boss again. "George!" Anthony exclaimed. "How are you?" "Getting by, Mr. Parker. I heard you were starting here at the fair. I came to take a look." "I'm glad you did. Want to try our food?" "Absolutely. I've missed your flavors." George was the first customer of Catherine's Flavors. He ordered a portion of the osso buco with creamy polenta. When he took the first bite, his eyes lit up. "Just like at the restaurant," he exclaimed, "even better because it has that homemade touch." George's reaction caught the attention of others passing through the square. Soon, a small line formed in front of their stall. Curious tourists, locals, workers on their lunch break. Everyone wanted to try the food that was causing a stir. "This tomato sauce is spectacular," said an elegant woman, clearly a tourist. "Where did you learn to make it?" "It's a family recipe," Anthony replied proudly, "created by my wife, who was an excellent cook. Can I get some to go? I want my husband to try it." "Of course. Mrs. Jenkins can prepare a takeout portion for you." Business kept growing throughout the day. By 2 in the afternoon, they had sold out of everything they'd prepared. Thomas rushed to the farmer's market to buy more ingredients, while Anthony and Mrs. Jenkins cooked another batch. "Dad, look who's over there," Thomas whispered, pointing across the square. Anthony looked and saw Brian, the arrogant manager of Bella Italia, watching the activity at their stall. The man was clearly uneasy, fidgeting nervously with his phone. "He's probably reporting to Richard," Anthony murmured. "Let him be nervous," Mrs. Jenkins said. "We're here working honestly." Brian watched for a few more minutes before walking away to make a call. Anthony wondered what kind of reaction Richard would have upon hearing that his former partners were selling food at the fair. The day ended surprisingly well. They had sold far more than expected, received constant praise from customers, and even secured a few special orders for private events. "How were the sales?" Thomas asked, counting the money. "Better than I dreamed," replied Anthony. "If we can keep this pace, we'll be able to expand soon." "Expand how?" "Maybe rent a bigger space, hire more people, or even open a small restaurant again." Mrs. Jenkins smiled at Anthony's excited plans. "Slow and steady wins the race," she said. "Let's first solidify what we have here." "You're right," Anthony agreed, "but it's good to dream again." As they packed up the stall, several people approached to place orders for the next day. One of them was Mary, the former employee from the Bella Italia salon. "Mr. Parker," she said, emotional, "how wonderful to see you here." "Mary, how are you, dear?" "Much better now that I see you working again. The food is delicious, just like the good old days." "Thank you. And you, how are you doing?" "I work at a smaller restaurant, but the pay isn't great. If you ever need help here, count on me." "I'll remember that," Anthony said. "If things keep growing, we'll need more hands." Mary left with a smile, and Anthony felt a special satisfaction. It was clear that the former Bella Italia employees were still loyal to him, not the establishment itself. On the way home, Thomas made an interesting observation. "Dad, did you notice how many people said the food was better than Bella Italia's?" "I did. That means we're on the right track." "It means more than that. It means Richard is losing quality, and people are noticing." "Maybe," Anthony said thoughtfully. "But our focus should be on doing our best, not competing with him." "I agree, but it's good to know we're offering something better." When they reached the boarding house where Anthony lived, Thomas made an unexpected suggestion. "Dad, what about moving to a better apartment? With the money we made today and what we'll earn in the coming days, we can afford a more decent place." "I don't want to rush, son. What if the market was just beginner's luck?" "It won't be. I saw people's faces when they tasted our food. That's not luck, it's quality." Anthony considered the idea. It would be nice to leave the modest boarding house and have a more suitable place, especially now that he was working again. "Let's see how the next few weeks go," he decided. "If business stays steady, then we'll think about improving our living situation." "All right. But promise you'll accept help when you need it?" "I promise, son." That night, Anthony slept better than he had in months. His body was tired from work. His hands smelled of spices and his heart was full of hope. The market had been just the first step, but it already showed that a fresh start was possible. The following Saturday, their second market day, the crowd was even bigger. Word about the quality of Catherine's flavors had spread through the city. Tourists came specifically to try the dishes, and locals became regulars. "Mr. Parker," an elderly lady said, approaching the stall, "I own a nearby inn. My guests are always asking where to find good homemade food. Can I recommend you?" "Of course. We're here every Wednesday and Saturday." "How wonderful. Let's make an informal partnership. I'll send my guests and you give them a special discount." "Sounds like a great idea," Thomas agreed. The inn partnership was just one of many opportunities that arose. A local businessman offered to supply ingredients at a discount. A small radio station wanted to interview them about the stall's success. A food blogger asked to feature them. "Dad, we're getting famous," Thomas joked. "I hope this is good," replied Anthony, a bit uneasy with all the attention. "It's great. It means our work is being recognized." That afternoon, as they prepared a new batch of tomato sauce, Mrs. Jenkins made an observation. "Did you see Brian was here again today?" "I did," said Anthony. "He was taking pictures of our stall with his phone." "He's definitely spying for Richard," said Thomas. "Let him spy all he wants," Mrs. Jenkins replied. "We have nothing to hide. We're working honestly." "Actually, I almost prefer that he knows about our success," Anthony said, surprising the other two. "Why, Dad?" "Because I want Richard to understand that I didn't give up, that even after losing everything, I'm still capable of building something good." "That's dangerous," warned Mrs. Jenkins. "Men like Richard don't like seeing their victims recover." "What harm can he do to us?" asked Thomas. "We're working legally. We owe nothing to anyone." "Powerful men always find ways to cause trouble," Mrs. Jenkins replied with concern. Her words proved prophetic. The following Monday, Thomas received a call from the fair organizers informing him that an anonymous complaint had been filed, questioning the sanitary conditions of Catherine's Flavors stall. "A complaint?" Anthony asked, incredulous. "But we follow all the regulations." "I know, Dad, but now they'll have to do a full inspection before clearing us for the next fair." "This is Richard's doing," Mrs. Jenkins said indignantly. "I'm sure of it." "Even if it is, we'll face the inspection with our heads held high," Anthony declared. "Our kitchen is clean, our ingredients are fresh, our methods are proper." The inspection happened on Tuesday. 2 health inspectors examined all the equipment, checked the origin of the ingredients, and observed the food preparation process. Anthony was nervous but confident everything was in order. "May I speak to the person in charge?" asked the lead inspector. "That's me," Anthony replied. "Sir, I'll be honest. We came here expecting to find violations based on the complaint we received. But everything is impeccable. In fact, your operation is more organized than many large restaurants we inspect." "Thank you," Anthony said, relieved. "Whoever made the complaint clearly doesn't know your work. You'll receive full clearance to continue operating." When the inspectors left, Thomas celebrated. "We did it, Dad. We passed the inspection with flying colors." "It was to be expected," Mrs. Jenkins said. "We've always done things right." "But this worries me," Anthony admitted. "If it really was Richard who filed the complaint, he won't stop here." "Then we have to stay one step ahead," Thomas said. "We'll work flawlessly so no accusation holds water." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following Wednesday was special. The food blogger published his piece on Catherine's Flavors, praising both the quality of the food and the story of resilience behind the business. The article was shared hundreds of times on social media, bringing even more visibility to the stall. "Look at this comment," Thomas said, reading from his phone. "Finally found the true taste of Italian cuisine in Aspen. The food at Bella Italia has completely lost its quality." "People are making comparisons," Mrs. Jenkins observed, "and we're coming out on top in those comparisons," Anthony added with satisfaction. That day's turnout was the biggest since they started. A steady line formed in front of the stall, and they had to improvise a ticket system to manage the service. Mary, the former employee of Bella Italia, showed up to help voluntarily during the peak hours. "Mary, are you sure you want to do this?" asked Anthony. "There could be consequences if Richard finds out." "Mr. Parker, that man already fired me. He can't do anything worse to me, and I like working with people who respect me." Mary's help made all the difference. She knew the tastes of Bella Italia's former customers who now frequented the market. She knew how to present the dishes attractively, and she had a special way of talking to people. "Mr. Parker," said a familiar customer, a retired professor who always had lunch at Bella Italia. "This food tastes just like the best days of the restaurant, actually even better." "Why do you think it's better?" asked Anthony, curious. "Because it has more soul. At the restaurant now, the food feels lifeless, mechanical. Here you can taste the care put into it." Comments like these repeated throughout the day. Anthony realized he wasn't just selling food, he was offering an experience people had lost at Bella Italia. By late afternoon, as they were already packing up the stall, an unexpected figure appeared, Richard himself. He approached slowly, wearing an expensive suit but with a tense expression on his face. "Hello, Anthony," said Richard, trying to sound casual. "Richard," Anthony replied coldly, without stopping his packing. "I heard you were working here at the market. As you can see, I am working, and working well." Richard looked around, observing the remnants of the day's activity, the empty pots, the compliments some customers left before leaving. "This is temporary, right? I mean, you'll look for something more, suitable for your age and experience." "This work is very suitable for me," Anthony replied. "I'm doing what I've always known best, quality food. Anthony, we were partners, friends. You don't have to do this. I can offer you a job at the restaurant, a consultant position, something more dignified." The offer took Anthony by surprise. Thomas and Mrs. Jenkins stopped what they were doing to listen. "Why would you do that?" Anthony asked. Because I feel things were left unresolved between us. Because I care about you." Anthony looked directly into Richard's eyes and saw something that surprised him: fear. Richard was afraid of the stall's success, afraid of the competition, afraid of losing even more customers. "Richard, when I was in the hospital, you could have visited me. You could have talked to me about the restaurant's decisions. Instead, you took advantage of my vulnerability to take what was mine. Things happened fast. I had to make decisions. You chose to betray me," Anthony interrupted. "Now you're facing the consequences of your choices, just as I'm facing the consequences of mine." Richard fell silent for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. "So you won't accept my offer?" "No, I won't. I'm perfectly fine where I am." "Anthony, be reasonable. A food stall is no place for a man of your standing. My standing is defined by the quality of my work, not the size of the establishment," Anthony replied firmly. Richard looked around once more, then turned to leave. But he stopped and turned back. "Anthony, you can't use the recipes we created together. They're the restaurant's property now." "The recipes I use here were created by my wife and me, long before you came into our lives," Anthony answered. "And even if they were yours, you can't replicate the original flavor." Richard left without another word, but his expression showed frustration and anger. Thomas waited for him to walk away before speaking. "Dad, he's desperate." "He really is," agreed Mrs. Jenkins, "and desperate men are dangerous." "We'll have to stay alert," said Anthony, "but we won't let fear stop us from growing." In the following weeks, the success of Catherine's Flavors only grew. They started receiving orders for private events, were invited to participate in a regional food festival, and even got an offer to provide meals for a local company. "Dad, I think it's time we seriously consider expanding," Thomas said one evening after a particularly busy day. "Expanding how?" "Renting a permanent space, opening a small restaurant, hiring staff." "I don't know, son. I've been enjoying this simpler life." "But think of the opportunities we're missing. Think of how many more people we could serve, how many jobs we could create." Anthony considered his son's words. It was true they were turning down work due to lack of resources. Mary was already helping regularly, and George had offered to work with them again. William, the former gardener at Bella Italia, had also shown interest in an opportunity. "Where would we get the money to open a restaurant?" "I have some savings, and with the business we're doing, we could get a loan." "Loans make me nervous after what I went through." "Dad, this time it's different. This time we have a solid business, loyal customers, proven revenue." Mrs. Jenkins, who had been listening, gave her opinion. "I think you should visit some available commercial spots, just to get an idea. It doesn't hurt to look." "Do you also think we should expand?" "I believe when God blesses a venture, He opens doors, and many doors are opening for you." Anthony agreed to at least check out some options. The next day, he and Thomas visited 3 commercial properties in downtown Aspen. The third one was perfect, a medium-sized space, well located, with a ready kitchen and a cozy dining area. "This place has good energy," said Anthony, walking through the empty room. "And the price is within our budget," added Thomas. "What kind of establishment are you planning to open?" asked the realtor. "A home-style Italian restaurant," replied Anthony. "Quality food, family atmosphere." Perfect for this neighborhood. There are plenty of locals and tourists looking for something more authentic than the big chain restaurants. Anthony pictured the space in operation, tables filled, the aroma of food spreading, the sound of lively conversation. The vision excited him. "What do you think, Dad?" "I think your mother would approve of this place," said Anthony, moved by emotion. They signed the lease the following week. The renovations would be minimal since the space was already in good condition. Thomas handled all the paperwork, while Anthony planned the menu and kitchen layout. Mrs. Jenkins took charge of training the staff on the special recipes. Mary became the dining room manager. George returned to the pantry, and William was hired to tend to the small outdoor area that would become a garden. "What should we name the restaurant?" asked Thomas. "I already know," replied Anthony. "Catherine's Trattoria. Simple, elegant, and it honors the memory of the one who created our best recipes." News of the new restaurant's opening spread quickly through town. Former customers of Bella Italia were enthusiastic. New customers who had tried their food at the fair made early reservations, and even tourists from other cities called to inquire. But the reaction that worried them the most was Richard's. According to comments that reached Anthony, he was furious about the direct competition that had emerged. There were rumors he was planning something to sabotage the opening of Catherine's. "Dad, I think we should hire security for the opening," suggested Thomas. "Do you think it's necessary?" "You never know. Better safe than sorry." The opening was scheduled for Friday evening. They decided to host a special invitation-only event to test the restaurant's operations before the official public opening. On the eve of the event, as they made final preparations, Anthony received an unexpected visitor. It was Richard's wife, Jennifer, an elegant woman who had always been kind to him during their partnership days. "Jennifer," said Anthony, surprised, "what brings you here?" "I need to talk to you, Anthony. It's important." She seemed nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder as if afraid of being seen. "Go ahead." "It's about tomorrow's opening. Richard is planning to cause trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "He hired people to stir up chaos during the event. He's trying to ruin your night." Anthony was shocked by the news. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I know what Richard did to you was wrong. Because I can't stand watching my husband turn into a cruel person. Because you've always been kind to me and you deserve your chance." "Jennifer, thank you for warning me. But why don't you talk to Richard? Try to change his mind?" "I already have. He won't listen anymore. He's obsessed with destroying anything tied to you." She handed Anthony an envelope. "Here are documents that might interest you. Copies of papers showing how Richard manipulated the transfer of Bella Italia. Maybe they'll help if you decide to take legal action." "I don't want to sue anyone, Jennifer. I just want to work in peace." "Then keep the documents in case you change your mind. And be careful tomorrow." She left quickly, leaving Anthony with a whirlwind of worries. He called Thomas and told him about Jennifer's visit. "Should we cancel the opening?" Thomas asked. "No way. We're having our event, but we'll be prepared." They decided to hire 2 discreet security guards and warned all staff about potential trouble. They also informed a few trusted customers so they could help if needed. The night of the opening arrived. Catherine's looked stunning, with fresh flowers on every table, candles creating a cozy atmosphere, and the wonderful aroma of food wafting from the kitchen. Guests arrived promptly, all eager to try the famous recipes in a more sophisticated setting. "Dad, everything's perfect," said Thomas, watching the dining room fill with happy people. "Your mother would be proud," Anthony replied, moved. The first dishes came out of the kitchen to enthusiastic praise. The special tomato sauce with homemade pasta was just right. The osso buco melted in the mouth, and the mushroom risotto surpassed even the original version from Bella Italia. "Anthony," said the town mayor, approaching with a broad smile, "what a wonderful event. The food is spectacular." "Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to have you here. The town is proud to have an establishment of this caliber. You're raising Aspen's culinary standards." The first 2 hours of the event went smoothly. There were no signs of the trouble Jennifer had mentioned. Anthony began to relax, thinking Richard might have changed his mind. But at 10 o'clock, a group of drunk men entered the restaurant, talking loudly and being deliberately disrespectful. It was obvious they weren't regular customers. They had been sent to cause trouble. "Good evening," said one of them, clearly agitated. "We heard the food here is good. We want a table." "I'm sorry," Mary replied politely. "Tonight is by invitation only. We open to the public next week." "Oh yeah? And who do you think you are to decide who gets in?" the man shot back, raising his voice. The security guards moved in discreetly, and Thomas also headed toward the commotion. Anthony stepped out of the kitchen when he heard the disturbance. "What seems to be the problem, gentlemen?" Anthony asked calmly. "The problem is you think you're too special to serve regular people," another man from the group retorted. "That's not it. Tonight is just a private event, but you're welcome to come back next week." "We want to eat now," the first man shouted, deliberately knocking over a flower vase. The guests began to grow uneasy. Some families with children stood up to leave. Anthony realized he needed to resolve the situation quickly. "Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to leave peacefully," one of the security guards said. "And what if we don't?" the group's leader challenged. That's when something unexpected happened. George, the former pantry worker, approached the group with a tray in his hands. "You don't remember me," George said calmly. "I've worked for 20 years serving in restaurants in this city. I know all of you." The men stared at George, clearly surprised to be recognized. "I know where you work, where you live, who your families are," George continued. "Now tell me, is it worth a few bucks to play this ridiculous role?" His words made the men uncomfortable. It was obvious they'd been hired to cause trouble, and now they were exposed. "And one more thing," George added. "Are you sure the person who hired you will take responsibility if you break anything here, or will they leave you to deal with the consequences alone?" The men exchanged glances. Clearly, they hadn't considered that possibility. The leader hesitated, then motioned to the others. "Let's go," he muttered. "This isn't worth it." The group left without further trouble, leaving the restaurant in peace. The guests applauded quietly, and the party returned to its pleasant atmosphere. "George, thank you," Anthony said, squeezing the employee's shoulder. "Don't mention it, Mr. Parker. I've seen this kind of problem before. The trick is not to confront them, but to show them they're not as clever as they think." The rest of the evening went smoothly. The guests praised not only the food, but also the graceful way the tense situation had been handled. "Dad, we did it," Thomas said when the last guest had left. "Catherine's has officially launched." "We really did," Anthony agreed. "And we passed our first pressure test." Mrs. Jenkins, who had run the kitchen all night, emerged with a tired but satisfied smile. The food was perfect. Every dish was praised. "And did you see how well the staff worked together?" "I did," Anthony said. "This team has everything it takes to succeed." The following Monday, Catherine's officially opened to the public. The buzz from the opening had been so positive that they already had reservations for the entire week. The phone wouldn't stop ringing with people eager to book tables. "Dad, remember when we worried if anyone would even show up to eat at our stall?" Thomas said, organizing the reservation book. "I do. Feels like a lifetime ago. Actually, it was only 3 months. Anthony paused and reflected on everything that had happened. 3 months ago, he was a humiliated man, broke, with no prospects. Now he was running a thriving restaurant, with a loyal team and the regained respect of the community. "You know what makes me happiest?" said Anthony. "What?" "It's not just the financial success. It's seeing that we can still make people happy with our food. It's watching our team work with motivation. It's having you by my side. It's special for me too, Dad. I've never felt so useful, so much a part of something important." The restaurant's business grew steadily in the first few weeks. They served both tourists and locals, from romantic couples to entire families. The menu was more varied than the farmer's market, but it kept the quality and care in preparation that had won over their first customers. One day during lunch, Anthony received an unexpected visitor. It was a well-dressed man around 50 years old who introduced himself as David Thompson. "Mr. Parker, may I speak with you privately?" "Of course, let's go to my office." The office was small, at the back of the restaurant, but tidy and welcoming. David sat down and got straight to the point. "I own a chain of restaurants in New York City. I came to Aspen on business and had lunch here today." I must say it's been years since I've had such authentic Italian food. Thank you for the compliment. It's more than a compliment, it's a proposal. I'd like to discuss the possibility of expanding Catherine's to New York City. We could open a branch, or even a small chain. The proposal took Anthony by surprise. Expanding to New York City would mean significant growth, more visibility, more profit. But it would also mean complications, pressures, the possibility of losing control over quality. It's an interesting proposal, Mr. Thompson, but I need time to think it over. Of course. Here's my card. If you're interested, we can schedule a more detailed meeting. When David left, Anthony called Thomas to tell him about the proposal. "Dad, this is fantastic," Thomas exclaimed. "It's our chance to grow exponentially." "Slow down, son. Growth isn't always synonymous with success. But think of the possibilities. We could bring our food to so many more people. And we could lose the quality that got us here. Remember what happened when we trusted ambition too much?" Thomas understood the reference to the problem with Richard and became more cautious. "You're right. Let's think carefully before deciding." They discussed the proposal with Mrs. Jenkins and other staff members. Opinions were divided. Some thought it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, while others preferred to focus on the local restaurant. "Why don't we schedule a meeting with this David?" suggested Mrs. Jenkins, "just to hear the details. It doesn't hurt to get more information." The meeting was set for the following week. David brought a detailed expansion plan, including financial projections, marketing strategies, and partnership proposals. Everything seemed very professional and promising. "What exactly would my role be in this expansion?" asked Anthony. "You'd be the consulting chef for the entire chain, responsible for maintaining recipe quality, training branch chefs, and ensuring authenticity is preserved." "And what investment would be required from me?" "No financial investment. You'd contribute your know-how, the recipes, the brand. We'd provide the capital to open the branches." "It sounds too good to be true," said Thomas. "I understand your hesitation," David replied, "but I'm interested in the unique quality you offer. There are many Italian restaurants in New York City, but few with the authenticity and flavor I tasted here." The proposal was truly tempting. Anthony asked for a week to think it over and consult a lawyer about the contract terms. During that week of reflection, something happened that influenced his decision. Mrs. Williams, an 80-year-old woman who had frequented the restaurant since its opening, had a health issue and was hospitalized. When he found out, Anthony personally prepared a special soup and took it to her at the hospital. "Mr. Parker," said Mrs. Williams, moved, "you didn't have to come all the way here." "Of course I did. You're our special customer. You know, I remember when you owned Bella Italia. It was a beautiful restaurant, but I never had the courage to go there. I thought it was too fancy for a simple woman like me. And now I feel at home in your restaurant. I feel like I can be myself, like you all care about me as a person, not just as a customer." Mrs. Williams' words deeply touched Anthony. There was the essence of what they had built, a place where people felt welcomed, where food was made with love, where every customer was treated like family. "Mrs. Williams, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If I opened other restaurants in big cities, do you think we could keep this same warmth, this same closeness with customers?" She thought for a moment before answering. "Mr. Parker, some treasures are special precisely because they're unique. If there were many, they'd stop being special." Her answer was like a revelation to Anthony. That night, he made his decision about the expansion proposal. "Dad, are you turning down the offer?" asked Thomas when he heard the decision. "I am, and I'll explain why." "Why?" "We've built something special here, a place where people like Mrs. Williams feel at home, a place where we know our customers by name, where we know their preferences, where they trust us. That's not something you can replicate on a large scale, but we'll miss a growth opportunity. Son, success isn't just measured by the size of the business. It's measured by the quality of life we provide for ourselves and the people around us." Thomas thought about his father's words and ended up agreeing. "Actually, you're right. What we have here is too special to risk." Anthony called David and politely declined the proposal. He explained that he preferred to focus on the local restaurant, always improving quality and service. "I understand your decision," said David, "and I respect it. In fact, it shows me that you truly care about quality above all else." "Exactly. And if you ever change your mind, you can reach out to me again." "Definitely." The following month solidified Catherine's as one of the best restaurants in Aspen. They received glowing reviews in specialty magazines, were recommended by travel guides, and built a loyal clientele that returned regularly. Meanwhile, the news about Bella Italia wasn't encouraging. Several employees had quit, customers complained about service and food quality, and there were rumors that Richard was facing financial difficulties. "Dad, don't you feel even a little satisfaction seeing Richard having problems?" Thomas asked one evening. "I feel sadness," Anthony answered honestly. "Sadness to see a place I loved being destroyed. Sadness to see someone losing themselves to greed and pride. Even after everything he did. Son, holding on to anger is like carrying a heavy stone in your backpack. It only weighs you down." Anthony's wisdom was tested a few weeks later when Richard showed up at Catherine's on a Saturday night. He looked visibly worn out, with dark circles under his eyes and an expression of exhaustion Anthony had never seen before. "Anthony, can I talk to you?" Richard asked. "Of course. Let's go to the office." They sat in the small office and for a few moments neither said a word. Richard looked at his own hands, clearly struggling to find the right words. "Anthony, I need to apologize." "Apologize? For what I did to you when you were in the hospital, for how I took over the restaurant, for trying to hurt your new business, for everything." Anthony was surprised by Richard's humility. This wasn't the same arrogant man he'd met at the market. "What happened, Richard?" "Everything is falling apart. Bella Italia is losing money every month. The staff doesn't respect my leadership. Customers complain constantly. And worst of all, I realized I don't know how to run a real restaurant." "What do you mean?" "I always thought it was enough to have capital, hire people, and delegate responsibilities. I never understood that a restaurant is so much more than that. That's art, it's passion, it's knowledge built over years." Anthony listened quietly, seeing genuine regret on his former partner's face. "You and Catherine built something special over decades. I thought I could just take it over and carry on as if nothing had changed. I was a fool. Richard, why are you telling me this? Because I can't live with the guilt anymore. Because I want to try to fix what I did wrong. Because I'd like to propose something." "What?" "I want to give Bella Italia back to you." The offer left Anthony stunned. It was the last thing he expected to hear. "Give it back how?" "Transfer ownership back to your name. No cost, no conditions, just trying to make up for the harm I caused." Anthony fell silent, processing the offer. Getting Bella Italia back would be like reclaiming a lost part of his soul. But it would also mean leaving Catherine's, starting over in a place filled with so many painful memories. "Richard, this is incredibly generous, but I need time to think. Of course, I completely understand. And if you decide to accept, I'll help with the transition in any way needed." "Why would you do that?" "Because I finally realized some things in life are more important than money or pride. Because I saw what you built here and understood I destroyed something far more valuable than any financial gain." Richard stood to leave, but Anthony stopped him. "Richard, will you stay for dinner tonight? I want you to try our food." I don't know if that would be appropriate." "It would. In fact, it would be a gesture of peace between us." Richard accepted the invitation. Anthony personally prepared a selection of the best dishes from the menu and served them to his former partner. During the meal, Richard was visibly moved. "Anthony, this food it's just like Bella Italia in its best days. Actually, it's better." "Why?" "Because it has soul again. Because you can feel the love in every bite." When Richard left, Anthony was deeply unsettled by their conversation. The offer to reclaim Bella Italia stirred emotions he thought he'd moved past. "Dad, are you going to accept the offer?" Thomas asked when he heard about the talk. "I don't know, son. Part of me really wants that place back, but another part doesn't want to abandon what we've built here. Can't we have both?" It would be too much responsibility, and it would divide our attention. Mrs. Jenkins gave her opinion when she heard about the proposal. "Mr. Parker, that man is genuinely sorry. I saw it in his eyes, but that doesn't mean you have to accept. What would you do in my place?" "I'd ask my heart where I feel most fulfilled, in the past that Bella Italia represents, or in the present we've built here." The answer came to Anthony a few days later, during a special dinner they hosted at Catherine's to celebrate Mrs. Williams's birthday. The party was a surprise, organized by the restaurant staff who'd grown fond of the kind-hearted woman. Seeing Mrs. Williams surrounded by affection, seeing her employees working like a family, seeing Thomas coordinating everything with skill and joy, Anthony understood where his heart truly lay. "Richard," Anthony said when he called to give his answer, "I deeply appreciate your offer. It's a noble gesture that shows your genuine remorse. But you're going to decline, aren't you?" "I am. Bella Italia represents my past, and it was a wonderful past. But Catherine's represents my present and my future. Here I've built something new, with people who chose to stand by my side. I understand, and I respect your decision." "Richard, can I suggest something?" "Of course. Why not sell Bella Italia and use the money to start something new, something that's truly yours, where you can apply what you've learned from your mistakes? Would you forgive me if I did that, if I started over in the same city? Richard, this city is big enough for everyone, and honest competition only raises the bar for all businesses. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for your forgiveness, your generosity, and for teaching me a lesson in dignity." 6 months after that conversation, Richard sold Bella Italia and opened a small bistro on the other side of town. His new place was modest, but he worked personally in the kitchen and with customers, applying the lessons he'd learned from his mistakes. Catherine's continued to thrive. They expanded with a small garden for special events, hired more staff, and even began offering Italian cooking classes for tourists. "Dad, remember that day when you were humiliated at the door of Bella Italia?" Thomas asked one evening. "I do." "Did you ever imagine that 3 years later we'd be here, with our own thriving restaurant, a wonderful team, and the respect of the whole city?" "I never imagined it," Anthony admitted. "That day I thought my life was over. In truth, your life was just beginning a new chapter. You're right. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what truly matters." Mrs. Jenkins, now 75 but still active in the kitchen, approached the two. "Do you know what makes me proudest of all we've built here?" "What?" father and son asked. "It's not just the restaurant's success. It's seeing how everyone who works here has grown, how every customer feels special, how the two of you have reconnected. That's worth more than any money." Anthony looked around the bustling restaurant, with happy customers, satisfied staff, and his son working beside him. It was true. The humiliation at Bella Italia's door had been painful, but it had also been the first step towards something far better. "You know what Catherine would say if she were here?" Anthony said. "What?" Thomas asked. "That the most important ingredient in any dish is the love with which it's prepared." And as he watched the joyful activity at Catherine's, Anthony knew they had found the perfect recipe for happiness. Honest work, a close-knit family, loyal friends, and always, always plenty of love in everything they did. A special evening came a few months later when the restaurant celebrated its 2nd anniversary. They decided to throw a party to thank all their loyal customers and dedicated staff who had made the dream possible. The party was planned with great care. They prepared a special menu featuring their guests' favorite dishes, decorated with fresh flowers, and even hired a small musical group to play Italian songs. During the celebration, Anthony gave an emotional speech. "Friends, when I opened this restaurant, I thought I was just starting a business. Today I realize we've built something far greater. We've built a family, a community, a place where people feel at home." The audience applauded warmly. Among those present were loyal customers like Mrs. Williams, beloved staff members like George and Mary, partners like the owner of the inn who always referred guests, and even Richard, who had become a true friend after overcoming his mistakes. "I want to especially thank 3 people," continued Anthony. First, Mrs. Jenkins, who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Second, my son Thomas, who taught me it's never too late for a fresh start. And third, my wife Catherine, who, though no longer physically here, remains present in every dish we prepare. Tears streamed down the faces of many in attendance. It was impossible not to be moved by Anthony's sincerity and gratitude. "And now," he said, raising his glass, "a toast to all of you, who have turned this place into so much more than a restaurant. You've made it a home." Everyone raised their glasses and toasted together. In that moment, Anthony felt complete peace in his heart. He had lost much in life, but he had gained even more. He had learned that true wealth isn't in what we possess, but in what we share. The celebration went on late into the night, filled with conversations, laughter, and stories. When the last guest had left, the Catherine's family gathered to clean up and talk about plans for the future. "Dad, I have a proposal," said Thomas. "Go ahead." "How about we start writing a book with Mom's recipes? We could include the story of the restaurant, the lessons we've learned, the special people we've met." "That's an interesting idea," said Anthony. "It would be a way to preserve Catherine's memory and share our experience with others." "I can help write," offered Mrs. Jenkins. "I have plenty of stories to tell about the old days, and I can handle the technical side, editing and publishing," added Thomas. "Then it's settled," said Anthony. "We'll write our book." The book project gave new energy to the whole team. Over the following months, they collected recipes, organized photos, wrote stories, and structured the content to be both useful and inspiring to others. The book was released on the 3rd anniversary of Catherine's. The chosen title was Flavors of Life: Recipes, Stories and Lessons from a Fresh Start. The work contained not just delicious recipes, but also reflections on resilience, family, friendship, and the importance of never giving up on dreams. The launch was a success. Local journalists attended. The book was featured in several magazines and websites, and the first printing quickly sold out. "Dad, we did it," said Thomas, showing a glowing review of the book published in a national food magazine. "Did what?" "Turned our story of overcoming into inspiration for others. How many people who've faced similar struggles will read our book and find hope?" "It's true," Anthony agreed. "Maybe that's our greatest achievement, showing that it's always possible to start over, always possible to build something beautiful after a great loss." The book's success brought national attention to Catherine's. Tourists from all over the country began arriving, eager to visit the restaurant that had inspired such a moving story. But Anthony and his team were careful not to let fame change them. They held on to the same values that had brought them success: quality food, heartfelt service, fair prices, and above all, humility. "Fame can be dangerous," Mrs. Jenkins warned. "It can make people forget their roots." "We won't forget," Anthony promised. "Our mission remains the same: to make people happy through good food and warm hospitality." And so Catherine's continued to grow, not in size, but in quality and reputation. It became a symbol that it's possible to start over at any age, that honest work is always rewarded, and that love is truly the most important ingredient in any recipe. 5 years after that humiliation at the door of Bella Italia, Anthony Parker was a completely different man. Not because he had regained his prosperity, that was just a consequence. He was different because he had learned the true meaning of success. Success wasn't in the size of his restaurant, but in the quality of the relationships he built. It wasn't in the amount of money he made, but in the satisfaction he felt at the end of each workday. It wasn't in public recognition, but in the inner peace he had achieved. And when young people came to ask for advice on how to overcome hardships or how to start over after great losses, Anthony always said the same thing: "Life will knock you down many times. What matters isn't avoiding the falls, but learning to get back up with dignity. And when you do get up, remember to reach out and help those still on the ground." End of story. Dear listeners, now that we've reached the end of Anthony's inspiring journey, we'd love to know, what did you think of his transformation? Do you believe forgiveness was the right decision? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart as much as it touched ours, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more uplifting stories.